A man stood refueling his car, casually chatting with a passenger still seated inside. As he gripped the nozzle, a small spark of static electricity arced from his hand to the filler neck, instantly igniting the rich fuel vapors. A flash fire erupted, enveloping the pump and the side of the vehicle. An untrained worker climbed into the cab of a bulldozer, treating the complex machine like a recreational vehicle. Lacking the skill to manage the machine's shifting center of gravity, he destabilized the unit. The bulldozer tipped and rolled over, turning the massive blade and tracks into immediate threats to everyone nearby. Curiosity kills in the cab of heavy machinery. Only certified operators should ever touch the controls, and ignition keys must be strictly managed to prevent unauthorized use. Riding a suspended concrete slab, a man descended into a deep, sandy pit. The excavation lacked shoring, and the crane's weight pressed dangerously on the edge. Suddenly, the unstable wall sheared off, burying him under tons of debris. The collapse was instant and fatal. Soil is heavy and unpredictable. Never ride a load and never enter a trench without proper shoring or shielding. In a fabric factory, a worker monitored a hot laminating machine to ensure the material was processing correctly. To verify the fabric surface was even, he placed his hand dangerously close to the active intake. The rotating rollers instantly caught his fingers, dragging his hand into the heated mechanism before he could pull back. His hand remained trapped and crushed between the scorching cylinders until the machine could be stopped. Rotating rollers create deadly nip points that act faster than human reflexes. Never touch moving machinery for inspections. Always rely on visual checks or fully stop the equipment first. A large truck carried a stack of insulation panels, a highly flammable cargo. Suddenly, the load ignited, turning the vehicle into a raging inferno. Workers frantically attempted to manually unload the burning panels, risking their lives as the flames accelerated. The blaze quickly consumed the entire truck despite their efforts. An operator triggered a waste baler from a restricted vantage point. Unaware, a colleague was inside cleaning. The heavy door closed, trapping the worker, while the operator wasted fatal seconds trying to force it open by hand. He eventually used the controls to release the victim, but the delay proved deadly. Blind spots and panic are a lethal mix. Ensure controls have a full view of the machine and train operators to use emergency stops immediately, not manual force. Two workers were machining a component without verifying that it was fully depressurized. As the tool made contact, the trapped internal pressure released explosively, turning the workpiece into a high-velocity projectile. The object struck one worker directly in the face, knocking him violently to the concrete floor. Stored energy can be invisible and deadly. Always bleed off all pressure and utilize proper machine guarding before repairing hydraulic or pneumatic parts. A crane attempted to hoist a large, thin steel coil from a truck using a standard hook. The hook slipped mid-lift, dropping the heavy coil, which smashed into the ground and burst open instantly. The steel band snapped, causing the coil to unwind violently like a giant spring. Fortunately, the nearby workers reacted quickly and ran clear of the expanding danger. Steel coils store massive potential energy. Always use proper C-hooks or coil lifters and maintain a wide exclusion zone to survive a dropped load. A worker climbed onto a moving conveyor belt to manually push steel bars into a rebar cutter. As the belt surged forward, it dragged his feet dangerously close to the shearing blades. Luckily, he escaped just in time. Conveyors are for materials, not people. Never stand on moving belts or bypass guarding. Use proper feeding tools to keep your distance from the hazard. In a steel furnace area, workers were supervising the melting process when the molten steel suddenly erupted in a violent explosion. Flames burst outward, hitting the worker closest to the furnace. He staggered away and ran toward the exit, but the fire had already burned through his clothing before others could put it out with extinguishers. Treat molten metal with maximum caution. Pressure buildup can turn into a firestorm. A man was standing on a tall stack of boxes, arranging them as a forklift held the next load beside him. Thinking it would be easier to step onto the pallet on the forklift, he shifted his weight to climb over. His foot slipped on the edge, and he fell from a significant height onto the concrete floor. Never climb onto pallets or loads. Forklifts are not platforms. An electrical short circuit caused an electrical cabinet in the factory to catch fire. Workers quickly rushed to the scene and extinguished the flames before they spread. Always inspect electrical systems regularly, keep flammable materials away from power cabinets, and shut off the main power immediately in case of fire to prevent serious accidents. Two workers stood atop stacked chemical containers on a rail car during transport, directly violating safety protocols. The rough handling or instability triggered the volatile cargo, identified as white phosphorus, causing it to auto-ignite and explode. The blast instantly sprayed sticky, burning chemical agents and debris, leaving the workers trapped in an inferno with no escape route. Explosives and pyrophorics have zero margin for error. Never stand on hazardous freight. Strictly follow hazmat handling procedures and maintain a safe exclusion zone during transport. A worker attempted to force open a compressed air tank mechanism using his foot, likely reacting to a stuck valve or cap. The physical impact on the pressurized vessel caused a catastrophic rupture. The sudden release of stored pneumatic energy acted like a bomb, launching the worker into the air with the force of the blast. Never fight pressure with physical force. If a valve is stuck, stop immediately. Depressurize the system completely before using proper tools to clear the jam. A man walked directly in front of a moving forklift that was heavily loaded, blocking the driver's forward view. With no clear line of sight, the operator didn't notice him crossing. The forklift kept moving and struck him, knocking him to the ground and running over his legs before the driver could brake. Maintain visible distance from forklifts and never cross their path. Limited visibility can turn a single step into disaster. Stevedores were unloading heavy cargo from a truck, maneuvering a loaded manual hydraulic lift toward the rear. As they stepped onto the extended tailgate, they relied on a structure held only by metal hinges, lacking any ground support props. Suddenly, the hinges sheared under the immense combined weight, causing the platform to collapse. The workers fell violently to the pavement, where they were instantly buried under the crashing hydraulic lift and displaced cargo. Loading gates are potential trap doors if overloaded. Always verify the weight capacity of tailgates, and utilize jack stands or support legs to ensure stability during unloading. A worker began manually untying the ropes, securing a large, thin steel plate. As the last knot gave way, the steel sprang outward with explosive force, releasing its stored tension. The violent recoil struck him, knocking him backward onto the hard ground. Flexible materials under tension are loaded traps. Always position yourself out of the line of fire and use long-handled tools to release bindings from a safe distance. A man stood near a truck that began to lose stability and tip. Instead of running away, he tried to steady the truck. The loose construction material spilled out instantly, crushing him beneath an avalanche of debris before the vehicle even fully overturned. Human strength cannot fight gravity. If equipment or loads begin to tip, clear the area immediately. Never attempt to catch or prop up failing heavy machinery. A crane truck was standing at the edge of a cliff, trying to lift a large rock onto its truck bed. The driver misjudged the position, allowing the crane and the rock to lean too far over the edge. This shifted the center of gravity, causing the entire truck to fall off the cliff. Always ensure heavy equipment is on stable, level ground, and well clear of cliff edges. Understand the crane's load limits and never overextend the boom, as this can easily lead to tipping. This warehouse stores fire extinguishers on pillars in the middle of the work area, directly in forklift traffic lanes. Because they are small and located in blind spots, drivers can easily collide with them. This video documents 2 separate accidents occurring at the same location in a single day, highlighting a serious safety design issue and the need to relocate or better protect firefighting equipment. Stepping inside a massive press for maintenance, a technician relied on a spotter rather than cutting the power. Suddenly, the machine cycled, crushing him, while the outsider frantically fumbled for the emergency stop. The delay was fatal. A spotter cannot stop physics. Never enter machinery without performing lockout, tagout, LOTO to physically isolate energy. Emergency buttons are for accidents, not protection. A worker attempted to balance along the narrow rim of a large fish tank while wearing casual slippers. The combination of wet surfaces and footwear with absolutely no grip proved disastrous. He lost his footing instantly and plummeted from the high wall, striking the hard ground below with force. Slippers have no place in industrial environments. Always wear non-slip safety boots and utilize designated walkways with guardrails to prevent falls in wet aquaculture zones. Inside a busy factory, a forklift driver sped down an aisle while glancing at his phone. Simultaneously, a worker stepped into the vehicle's path, his eyes also glued to a screen. Blinded by distraction, the driver struck and ran over the pedestrian before he could brake. Divided attention in a high-risk environment is a recipe for disaster. A visitor approached a molten mold in a steel core plant to observe, wearing absolutely no protective gear. Suddenly, a red-hot steel core was flung from the machine, striking him directly. Molten metal has no respect for observers. Strictly enforce visitor exclusion zones and mandatory PPE compliance to ensure safety on the production floor. A crane operator attempted to hoist a large steel column at a steep angle instead of a vertical lift. As the heavy load left the ground, gravity corrected the angle, causing the column to swing violently sideways. The uncontrolled steel beam struck a nearby worker with crushing force before he could retreat. Side loading creates a wrecking ball. Always center the hook directly over the load's center of gravity and use taglines to control motion from a safe distance. A worker performed maintenance on a compressed air tank without ensuring it was fully depressurized. The vessel, unable to withstand the structural stress while under pressure, ruptured explosively. The blast wave and shrapnel struck the worker with devastating force. Stored energy is invisible and deadly. Always completely bleed the air, leave valves open, and verify zero energy before starting repairs on any pressure vessel. Securing a huge ship, a mooring rope came under immense tension while a worker stood in the dangerous snapback zone. Suddenly, the line parted, whipping back with explosive force. The recoil struck the man, sending him tumbling backward violently. A snapping rope is a silent killer. Identify and mark all snapback zones on the dock and never stand within the arc of a line under load. Walking across a floor under construction, a worker stepped onto a scaffolding plank that was not fully supported. He unknowingly shifted his weight to the unsupported overhang, causing the loose board to tip like a seesaw. With no footing left, he plummeted from the height. A loose board is a trap door. Ensure all decking is fully secured or cleated. Plank overhangs must never exceed safe limits, usually 12 inches, 30 centimeters, to prevent tipping. Workers attempted to unload a forklift carrying a heavy load from a truck without a proper dock. As the machine reached the tailgate, the sudden weight shift caused the truck to tip violently. The forklift fell off the edge, crushing the men beneath it. Gravity is unforgiving during unloading. Always use a secured loading dock and ensure the transport vehicle is fully stabilized before moving heavy equipment. A forklift operator lifted an unstable load while workers were dangerously positioned inside a nearby truck. The load shifted and fell, striking the workers and knocking one to the ground. In the ensuing panic, the operator leaped from the cab to help without neutralizing the vehicle. The unmanned forklift continued to roll, running over the operator who had tripped while exiting. Secure the machine before you act. Regardless of the emergency, always lower the forks, set the parking brake, and turn off the engine before exiting the cab to prevent a secondary tragedy. 2 workers attempted to secure a rock-cutting machine without first stabilizing the massive workpiece. As they worked, the heavy rock shifted and toppled directly onto them. The impact was instantaneous and crushing. Unsecured loads are ticking time bombs. Always chock, block, and secure heavy materials before starting work, and never place your body in the line of fire of an unstable load. An employee in a sorting facility inadvertently placed a finger into a conveyor nip point while handling goods. Crucially, the emergency stop button was mounted out of arm's reach, leaving him trapped and helpless. In a panic, he attempted to yank his hand free against the moving belt, resulting in severe tearing injuries. Safety controls must be reachable in milliseconds. Install emergency pull cords along the entire length of conveyors and strictly guard all roller intake points to prevent entrapment. A crane attempted to transfer thin steel plates between trucks without using edge protection on the rigging. The sharp metal edges sliced through the cable under tension, causing it to snap mid-air. The load plummeted, crushing the bed of the receiving truck. Sharp edges destroy lifting gear. Always use softeners or padding between the load and the sling to prevent cuts and catastrophic failures. A father and son were driving when their electric bike suddenly malfunctioned. Acrid smoke poured from the floor vents, quickly followed by an intense, erupting fire from the battery pack beneath them. Trapped, they both suffered severe burns before escaping. Always maintain and check your car regularly to avoid such unexpected incidents. 2 workers stood directly beside a metallurgical furnace to monitor the process. Suddenly, the unit exploded, showering the immediate area with tons of molten metal. The men attempted to flee, but the cascading liquid heat overtook them instantly. Speed is useless against a molten metal eruption. Always maintain designated safe distances and utilize remote operation tools to ensure personnel remain outside the blast zone. A worker noticed a large, unstable stack of glass shards leaning against a wall beginning to tip. Acting on instinct, he attempted to physically hold back the collapsing weight. The load was too heavy and crashed down, shattering on top of him and causing severe crushing injuries. Never attempt to catch a falling heavy load. Clear the area immediately. Material can be replaced, but a life cannot. Using an oil drum as a makeshift platform, a welder struck an arc while standing directly on the container. The heat, or sparks, ignited residual vapors inside, instantly detonating the drum. The blast launched him high into the air before he crashed violently onto the floor. A worker attempted to navigate a congested factory floor by stepping directly onto a rotating drive shaft. He lost his footing and, in a fatal reflex to break his fall, reached out and jammed his hands into the narrow gap between the spinning shaft. The friction instantly drew him into the machine, resulting in a catastrophic, fatal injury. Guards must cover the hazard, not create new ones. Rotating shafts must be completely enclosed to prevent contact or stepping, and aisles must be kept clear so workers never have to climb over machinery. A worker at a steel pipe facility violated critical safety protocols by performing a hoisting operation alone, bypassing the mandatory two-person rule. He failed to wedge the bottom layer of pipes to prevent rolling and walked into a narrow gap between unsecured stacks. The pipe shifted, pinning him against the adjacent stack. Always adhere to the buddy system for hoisting, strictly secure round loads against rolling, and never attempt a rescue without a stabilized plan. Bypassing the workbench vise, a man attempted to grind a metal piece while holding it in his hand. To stabilize the load, he pulled it close to his body, where the spinning disc snagged his loose shirt. The torque instantly wound the fabric tight, causing fatal asphyxiation before he could disengage the power. Rotating tools have an appetite for loose fabric. Always clamp your work, wear tight clothing, and keep tools away from your torso. Technicians were conducting maintenance inside the narrow vertical shaft of a wind turbine. Suddenly, unsecured bolts and heavy components from a platform above dislodged and plummeted down, striking the crew below. In vertical workspaces, gravity turns loose objects into deadly projectiles. Always secure tools with tethers. Install tow boards on upper platforms, and wear impact-rated helmets to survive falling hazards. A worker was positioned in the blind spot of a crane, attempting to free a chain from beneath the heavy bucket. The operator, unable to see him, moved the machinery. The bucket struck the worker with crushing force. Never assume the operator sees you. Establish eye contact or use a signalman before approaching heavy equipment. In a busy kitchen, two workers' team lifted a heavy pot of boiling water. One lost his grip. The pot tilted, sending scalding water cascading across the tile. His partner slipped on the instant hazard and went down. Transporting such dangers demands more than just manpower. It requires the right tools for the job. A worker in a fabric factory was manually feeding the end of a cloth roll into a winding machine. His hand was suddenly caught in the folds, and the machine relentlessly dragged his entire body into the spool. Lacking safety sensors, the device failed to stop and actually accelerated, spinning him with lethal force. Manual feeding into rotating machinery requires strict guarding. Never operate winders without automatic shutoff sensors or presence-sensing devices to stop the cycle instantly upon contact. A worker was lowered into a deep excavation that lacked proper shoring or stabilization. Although he recognized the signs of a collapse and signaled for extraction, the soil gave way faster than the crane could lift him. The walls collapsed, burying him instantly under tons of earth. A trench without shoring is just a grave. Never enter an excavation deeper than 1.5 meters, 5 feet, unless it is properly sloped, shored, or shielded to withstand the immense pressure of the surrounding soil. A worker started a lathe while standing dangerously close to the exposed spindle. The rotating mechanism instantly snagged his loose t-shirt, violently pulling him toward the machine. He fought against the pull and luckily managed to rip free just before being entangled. The operator attempted to lift a massive metal block using a cable rated for a lower weight. The excessive tension caused a catastrophic tensile failure, snapping the line instantly. The heavy load plummeted, crushing the truck bed and narrowly missing the operator's feet. Rating limits are not suggestions. The same thing happened to this man when he was welding a pressurized gas cylinder without wearing any protective gear. The cylinder suddenly exploded, leaving the worker lying motionless on the floor from the blast. Never forget to use proper personal protective equipment, PPE, and follow all safety protocols. A crane equipped with a man lift was transporting a worker when the worker accidentally came into contact with an overhead high-voltage power line. The worker in the basket was directly exposed to the electrical current and fell as both he and the man lift dropped to the ground. Always maintain a safe distance from all power lines and assume they are energized. Use a spotter to monitor for overhead hazards. In a textile factory, a female worker got too close to a running fabric winding machine. Her entire upper body was dragged into the rotating rollers, flipping her repeatedly. Other workers noticed the abnormal noise, rushed over, and shut down the machine before pulling her free and calling for help. Stay clear of moving rollers. Loose clothing can pull you in faster than you can react. The female worker was putting the product into the air compressor when she just put the product on, and before she could pull her hand back, the machine pressed on her hand. Perhaps this machine was illegally modified to increase speed and convenience when working and lost the sensor function. Never bypass safety sensors or guards on machinery. A worker powered on a large industrial fan and tilted the head upward while the blades were spinning at full speed. The clearance failed, causing the metal blades to strike the frame and shatter explosively. High-velocity debris sprayed outward, striking the worker directly in the face. Equipment failure turns components into shrapnel. Always inspect fan guards and clearances before operation, and never adjust the angle of a fan while it is in motion. In an aluminum factory, a worker stood below to supervise the replacement of electrodes. He positioned himself directly underneath the crane to inspect the process. Suddenly, a heavy structural component detached from the crane assembly above and plummeted down. The metal part struck the worker with devastating force before he could escape. Overhead, machinery poses risks beyond just the load it carries. Always maintain a strict exclusion zone during maintenance and never stand under equipment, as loose parts create a deadly line of fire. A crane operator swung a load without ensuring adequate clearance, causing the boom to strike a standing scaffold. The impact destroyed the structural integrity of the temporary platform. The scaffold collapsed instantly, sending the workers on top plummeting to the ground. Heavy equipment and working platforms must be separated. Always use a dedicated signalman, banksman, to guide lifts near structures and verify swing radius clearance before operations begin. Workers at an aluminum refinery were managing the melting process when moisture trapped in the charge material came into contact with the molten bath. The water instantly flashed into steam, triggering a massive explosion within the furnace. The blast force ejected a wave of molten aluminum, raining liquid metal down on the workers stationed nearby. Water expands explosively when submerged in molten metal. Rigorously preheat and inspect all charge materials for moisture to prevent these devastating steam explosions. Another case of high-voltage electric shock occurred when several men used dry bamboo poles to adjust an overhead power line. The moment the poles made contact, they were all electrocuted and fell to the ground. Always keep a safe distance from power lines and never attempt to touch or adjust them with any tool. Only trained electrical professionals with proper equipment should perform this work. Those men are attempted to refill an alcohol stove while the flame was still active, ignoring the high heat. As the fresh fuel poured out, the vapors caught fire instantly, causing a flashback that sprayed burning liquid onto the men and the surrounding area. The fire spread rapidly, engulfing the kitchen in seconds. Never add fuel to a hot or burning device. Extinguish the flame completely and wait for the equipment to cool down to prevent flash fires. Investigating a malfunction, a man peered deeply into the operational zone of an automated machine. Due to his dangerous proximity and machine still was in full operation, instantly trapping him against the frame. The crushing force resulted in fatal injuries before he could be extricated. This man leaned his entire body on a large car tire that was being inflated, and the tire exploded. He was immediately thrown far away. Never lean on or stand directly over a tire while it is being inflated. Use a clip-on chuck and stand at a safe distance, as tires can explode with dangerous force if they fail. At a busy cargo port, a man approached a heavy transport vehicle to speak with the driver. Following the conversation, the driver immediately initiated a turn, assuming the pedestrian had moved away. Caught in the vehicle's blind spot, the man was struck and crushed by the swinging rear wheels before he could react. Eye contact does not guarantee safety once the gaze is broken. Pedestrians must stay clear of the dangerous turning radius, and drivers must visually verify that the blind spot is empty before moving. Commuters crowded a busy residential escalator, unaware of critical wear. Suddenly, the steps collapsed, sweeping passengers into the exposed machinery below. Escalators are powerful systems that can fail catastrophically. Strict maintenance is non-negotiable. Always locate the emergency stop button and never overcrowd the steps to ensure public safety. A male worker stood directly on a moving conveyor belt to sort goods, oblivious to his changing position. He failed to notice the belt carrying him toward the junction where two sections met. Suddenly, his legs were dragged into the gap and violently squeezed by the machinery. Conveyors are designed for cargo, not people. Never stand or walk on a moving belt. Always perform sorting tasks from a safe, stationary platform to avoid entrapment. A woman was standing near the spindle of a wood planer. Piles of wood nearby became unstable, and as she stepped back to avoid them, she got caught in the planer's spindle. Her co-workers quickly spotted her and stopped the machine. Always maintain a clear work area free of unstable materials and keep a safe distance from all moving machine parts. A man approached a stack of pallets propped up in a makeshift A shape. As he pulled one free, he destabilized the precarious pile. The heavy timber collapsed instantly, crushing him beneath the weight. Vertical stacking is a gravity trap. Always store empty pallets lying flat to ensure stability and prevent dangerous collapses. A worker was using a high-pressure hose to wash down a pig pen when he suffered a massive electric shock. The cause was likely an insulation failure in the water pump, which energized the water stream and the wet floor. Standing in water without protection, the current passed directly through his body. Water creates a direct path for lethal current. In a glass factory, a crew crowded a forklift while one man stood opposite to steady large sheets by hand. As the machine halted, inertia sent the heavy glass toppling forward. The man, powerless to stop the shifting weight, was instantly crushed underneath. Hands are not cargo straps. Always secure loads mechanically. Never stand in the fall zone or try to catch a falling load with your body. To speed up workflow, safety shields were removed from a vertical press. The worker was standing too close while a coal truck was unloading. As the coal poured out rapidly, he couldn't escape and was buried under it. His cries for help faded as the coal covered him. In places where tons of material fall in an instant, distance is the worker's strongest shield. In a factory, a worker in a wire factory reached inside a wire drawing machine to inspect the operation, ignoring the moving parts. Suddenly, the mechanism snagged his hand, violently pulling his entire body into the equipment. Co-workers frantically hit the emergency stop, but the rotational force was too fast. Rotating parts are relentless. Never bypass guards or touch moving equipment. Always lock out, tag out, low tow before any intervention. In a factory, a worker bent over an active automated stamping line, positioning himself directly within the path of the machinery. Fixated on the stamping mechanism, he failed to notice the heavy frame cycling toward him. The moving structure struck him, trapping his body and throwing him to the floor in agony. Tunnel vision blinds you to danger. Maintain situational awareness and never lean over active equipment. If you must inspect closely, stop the machine first. While mixing paint in a workshop, a worker's handheld mixer suddenly erupted in flames. His attempts to douse the fire were useless as it rapidly grew, fueled by the flammable liquids. Even simple power tools can become critical ignition sources in vapor-rich environments. Always have the correct fire extinguisher, e.g. dry chemical or CO2, immediately available when working with flammable materials. A worker attempted to clear a blockage in a material feed hopper without shutting down the equipment. As he reached inside, the automatic feeding mechanism cycled, trapping his body against the steel frame. The intense pressure caused severe crushing injuries before the machine could be halted. Never reach into feed hoppers or near moving parts during operation. Always de-energize and lock out the system, LOTO, before attempting to remove obstructions. Ignoring basic fire safety, a man poured flammable liquid directly onto an open flame. The fire instantly climbed the liquid stream in a flashback, detonating the vapors inside the container. Engulfed in flames, he panicked and ran, tragically fanning the fire with fresh oxygen. Vapors are invisible fuses. Never add accelerants to a fire. If ignited, stop, drop, and roll immediately. Running only ensures severe injury. Always check load limits. A forklift truck carrying a large stack of bags in a warehouse accidentally ran over a woman who was talking nearby. She was standing in the truck's blind spot, an area that was obscured by the large load of bags. Always be aware of vehicle blind spots, especially on forklifts with large loads. A man was attempting to lift a heavy truck ramp to fold it up. The ramp was too heavy and it fell back on him. His colleagues rushed over and pulled him out. Always use proper lifting techniques and ask for help with heavy objects. Ensure that mechanical aids like ramp springs or hydraulics are in good working order before use. A worker began welding directly next to a stack of flammable materials, bypassing essential safety checks. Sparks from the torch landed on the fuel, instantly igniting a massive, uncontrollable blaze. The fire spread rapidly, threatening the entire facility. Sparks and fuel are a recipe for disaster. A female worker operated a drilling and cutting machine without clearing the accumulated debris from the mold. As she fed new material, the pressure violently ejected the trapped waste. The high-speed projectile struck her body, knocking her to the ground. A cluttered workspace creates projectile hazards. Always clear chips and swarf before starting a new cycle to prevent dangerous ejections. A crane operating near the site perimeter lost stability. As it overturned, the boom extended beyond the construction fencing, crashing down onto a passing motorbike on the adjacent road. The impact crushed the vehicle, involving an innocent member of the public. The drop zone respects no fences. Always calculate the maximum fall radius of the boom. If it overlaps with public roads or walkways, traffic must be diverted or stopped during lifting operations. A forklift operator was using a forklift to move iron coils near the base pit of a plate rolling machine. While reversing, the forklift struck a stack of coils on the opposite side of the aisle. Without shutting off the engine or engaging the handbrake, this man left the seat to check the situation. The forklift, still in reverse gear, continued moving on its own. Moments later, the left rear wheel dropped into the base pit, causing the forklift to flip and the safety door to slam onto him with full force. Always stop the engine, apply the handbrake, and secure the gear before leaving a forklift. One lapse can flip a machine and crush its operator. In a small factory, a male worker went to inspect a jammed milling machine without wearing any protective gear. Believing the stoppage was minor, he reached inside while the equipment was still powered. The rotating shaft grabbed his sleeve and pulled him in, trapping his hand deep inside the mechanism with a violent twist. A nearby co-worker sprinted over, hit the emergency stop, and fought to free his hand while calling for medical support. Never reach into an active machine. Shut it down completely before any inspection or repair. A worker stood dangerously close to the intake of a powerful sludge separator, ignoring the designated safe zone. The intense suction snagged his clothing, instantly dragging him into the churning mechanism. Colleagues rushed to hit the emergency stop, but the machine pulled him in faster than they could react. Human reflexes cannot compete with industrial rotation speeds. Always remain behind protective guards and never wear loose clothing near intake lines. A crane operator hoisted a massive block of material without utilizing taglines to prevent lateral movement. As the load rose, it began to sway violently, shifting the center of gravity dangerously off balance. The uncontrolled momentum caused the heavy block to fall, dragging the entire crane structure down in a catastrophic collapse. A swinging load can easily capsize even the heaviest equipment. Always use taglines to control the load and never attempt a lift without calculating dynamic stability. A crane operator lifted loads to a staging area behind his truck, completely obstructing his view of the ground. Just as the boom swung, a worker on a motorbike drove into the blind spot. The heavy hook struck the rider's head, knocking him violently to the ground. Operating blindly invites catastrophe. Always require a signalman when line of sight is blocked and strictly barricade the crane's swing radius to keep all personnel and vehicles clear. An untrained and unauthorized employee attempted to move heavy, cold-rolled steel coils using a crane equipped with a crude, homemade hook. A construction worker climbed a high scaffold to perform a task, neglecting to secure his safety harness to an anchor point. As he moved along the platform, he lost his footing and plunged over the edge. Without a lifeline to arrest the fall, he struck the ground below with devastating force. Gravity offers no second chances. 100% tie-off compliance is the only defense against fatal falls from height. An operator attempted to hoist a massive load that far exceeded the crane's rated capacity. As the weight bore down, the machine was pulled past its tipping point, unable to release the cargo in time. The crane toppled forward, crashing into a twisted wreck of steel. Gravity cannot be cheated. Always verify the load weight against the lift chart before hoisting. Never rely on feel to judge stability. A worker was securing a pallet of heavy metal bearings, unaware of its instability. As he inspected the load, one side suddenly tipped over, causing him to stumble and fall. His unfastened helmet flew off mid-air, leaving him unprotected. His head struck the concrete with full force, knocking him unconscious. PPE fails if not worn correctly. Always secure chin straps and verify load stability to prevent life-altering brain injuries. A woman worked alone using a ladder to clean near an active light fixture. She accidentally contacted the live current, suffering an immediate electric shock. The jolt threw her from the unstable support, crashing her to the floor as panicked colleagues rushed to help. Improvised equipment and live power are a fatal mix. Always use proper non-conductive ladders and de-energize circuits before working near electrical fixtures. To prevent fatal collisions, smoke began billowing from a dust collector at a wooden furniture plant, signaling an internal fire. Panicked workers rushed to open the inspection door to fight the flames manually, ignoring containment protocols. The sudden rush of fresh oxygen hit the superheated dust, triggering a violent flashback explosion. The resulting fireball erupted outward, engulfing the workers standing in the blast zone. Never introduce air to a contained fire. The reaction is often deadly. Rely on automatic suppression systems and immediate evacuation rather than manual intervention. A man went to the riverbank to loosen a concrete block and stood directly under the crane's bucket. As the crane moved, the bucket suddenly detached and struck him, causing him to fall. The operator rushed over, and fortunately he was okay. Never stand under a suspended load and always stay clear of heavy equipment. Two mechanics were working on a vehicle raised high, relying on a lifting mechanism that was not properly secured or locked. As the car shifted and began to tilt, one worker made a fatal instinctual error. He attempted to physically catch the heavy vehicle to stop it from falling. The weight of the car instantly overpowered him, tipping further and crushing him against the shop floor. Never try to catch a falling load. If a vehicle or heavy object begins to fall, your only priority is to clear the danger zone immediately. Equipment can be replaced, lives cannot. A worker recklessly climbed onto a stack of pallets resting on a forklift's tines. He stood on the unsecured load as the operator began to raise the lift, treating the machine as a makeshift elevator. Suddenly, the unstrapped pallets shifted under his weight and tilted violently. The stack collapsed, sending the worker plummeting to the concrete floor along with the heavy cargo. Forklifts are designed exclusively for materials, never for personnel. Strictly prohibit riding on forks. Always use a certified man basket or aerial lift for working at heights. Workers struggled to push a heavy mobile scaffold into an elevator. To gain better leverage, one man made the fatal decision to crawl underneath the frame to push from below. The structure suddenly collapsed under the strain, crushing him against the floor. Never place your body under a suspended load. Always dismantle scaffolding before transport and use proper material handling equipment instead of manual force. A female worker loaded a part into a press and reached behind the mold to adjust a misalignment. With her arm resting directly on the die, the machine suddenly cycled. The ram slammed down instantly, crushing her arm with immense force. Your limbs cannot withstand tons of pressure. Never put hands in the die area. Use safety blocks and long-handled tools for all adjustments. During the lifting of the tower crane, a temporary lifeline anchor failed. One worker's fall protection system was attached to this failing component, dragging him off the structure as it fell. The other worker, securely anchored to a stable part of the crane, remained suspended but in critical danger. Your safety is only as strong as your anchor. Never attach fall protection to temporary bracing, moving loads, or unverified points. Always verify anchor points can withstand at least 5,000 pounds, 22.2 kilopascals. A crane's hook, ascending high under supervision, suddenly snapped free. It plummeted, crushing the operator's cab below. The operator, caught while trying to escape, was fatally struck. When heavy machinery is in use, the smallest point of failure can have the most devastating consequences. Two men welded an iron frame using a cardboard box as a makeshift shield against sparks. The flammable cardboard instantly caught fire from the intense heat. The flames jumped to the merchandise displayed on the frame, causing a rapid blaze. Cardboard is fuel, not protection. Always use fire-resistant welding blankets and remove all combustibles from the hot work area. The workers were welding two leaking pressure gas tanks, all of them wearing no protective gear. Then one of the tanks exploded, throwing them far away. Never weld on or near any container that is pressurized or has held flammable materials. Hot work on any container that held flammables requires specialized training and permits. A forklift transporting molten metal suffered a mechanical failure, causing the ladle to tip and spill its superheated contents across the factory floor. The spill created an immediate exclusion zone due to intense thermal radiation and the risk of splashing or explosions if the metal contacted moisture. Standard equipment fails under extreme heat. Always use purpose-built carriers with heat shielding for molten transport and strictly enforce a no pedestrian zone along the transport route. A worker encountered a malfunction when a truck's moving platform failed to stop at its limit. Instead of engaging the emergency stop or cutting the power, he reacted with frustration, striking the handheld controller. This physical impact failed to break the circuit, causing the mechanism to over-travel and suffer a catastrophic structural collapse. A female worker, dangerously positioned on the moving platform, fell with the load. Percussive maintenance is not an emergency procedure. Always use the e-stop button for malfunctions and strictly forbid personnel from riding on cargo lifts or standing on moving loads. In a workshop, a man flipped a thin metal sheet and the sharp edge sliced into his heel. This incident highlights the importance of staying alert, using proper protective gear, and handling materials carefully to prevent avoidable injuries. A worker prepared to tip a heavy workpiece, utilizing a crane that was both unsuitable for the task and improperly secured. As he operated the controls to engage the hook, the shifting load applied torque that the unstable base could not handle. The rear frame of the crane suddenly detached and collapsed forward, pinning the man underneath the heavy metal structure before he could escape. Structural integrity is the foundation of lifting safety. Never attempt lifts with unverified equipment. Always ensure cranes are properly rated and securely anchored to withstand tipping forces. To rearrange stock, the worker climbed onto the truck bed to adjust the cargo box being lifted by the crane. Suddenly, the crane rope snapped and the heavy box fell directly onto him. In lifting zones, even one snap can change everything. Distance is protection. A worker accidentally ignited diesel fuel during machine reconditioning. Instead of retrieving a fire extinguisher, he panicked, blowing on the flames and then pouring water on the burning liquid. This dangerous reaction likely spread the fire, as water causes burning fuel to float and splash, intensifying the blaze. Water spreads oil fires. Never use water on liquid fuel fires, Class B. Always use a dry chemical or foam extinguisher to smother the flames. Taking a dangerous shortcut to save time, a man attempted to step over a rotating machine shaft. The spinning mechanism instantly snagged his loose shirt, violently jerking him off balance and into the equipment. He narrowly escaped death, suffering severe trauma from the fall. Shortcuts cut lives short. Never step over active machinery. Always use designated walkways and keep a safe distance from rotating parts. A worker stand on an unsecured A-frame ladder to repair a high shop sign, working entirely alone without a harness or a spotter. As he shifted his weight to climb down, he momentarily lost focus and missed a rung. The unsteadied ladder wobbled, and unable to regain his grip, he plummeted from the height directly onto the pavement. Routine tasks often breed complacency that leads to grave injury. Always maintain 3 points of contact, secure the ladder's base, and never work at heights without a second person to assist. Attempting to lift a long concrete column from a truck, the crew misaligned the rigging points. This imbalance caused the massive pile to slip free and crash down. The worker narrowly dodged the impact while the heavy chain continued to swing dangerously overhead. Gravity exposes every mistake. Always locate the center of gravity, 𝗀𝗃𝗲𝗏, and ensure the load is perfectly balanced before hoisting. A forklift carrying a large stack of plywood was moving north, while the factory manager walked ahead in the same direction. Entering a low visibility area, the driver couldn't see the path because the load blocked his view. The forklift hit the manager, pulling him underneath and dragging him forward until the driver felt abnormal shaking and stopped. Ensure clear visibility and keep all pedestrians away from moving forklifts. One blind spot is enough to run someone down. Distracted by a phone call, a worker leaned in to measure a metal coil on a rolling mill. Wanting a more accurate reading, he made a critical error. He placed his foot inside the machine's path. Instantly, the silent machinery roared to life, dragging him in. He was spun violently, again and again, until a colleague sprinted over, slammed the emergency stop, and pulled his body from the mechanism. Never place any part of your body into machinery, even if it is off. A driver pulled into a crowded station to refuel his vehicle's high-pressure gas tank, neglecting that the cylinder was overdue for inspection. As the pressure increased, the compromised vessel ruptured violently. The resulting explosion sent shrapnel flying, critically injuring the owner and several bystanders. Pressure vessels require rigorous maintenance to remain safe. Strictly adhere to periodic hydrostatic testing and inspection schedules to prevent catastrophic failures. A male worker was using a remote control to operate an overhead crane, moving a heavy metal bar. He was walking along with the load directly underneath it. While still in this dangerous position, he operated the remote to release the bar, causing it to fall directly on him. Never walk directly under a suspended load. Always maintain a safe distance and ensure you are clear of the drop zone before releasing any load. A worker entered the restricted zone of an automatic conveyor system for inspection without powering it down. As he turned his attention to a nearby shelf, the running conveyor moved, pinning his body against the stationary racking. He was crushed between the heavy machinery and the steel shelf. Automation does not respect personal space. Never enter an active machine zone without performing lockout, tag out, loto to eliminate the risk of crushing. A little girl was riding her bicycle past a warehouse where a truck was backing up. As the two approached, her bicycle entered the truck's large blind spot. The truck ran over her, crushing the bicycle. Luckily, the girl fell under the truck and only injured her arm. Always be aware of vehicle blind spots, especially on large trucks. Drivers must check all mirrors and blind spots before backing up. A forklift operator lifted goods from a high, unsecured rack while the manager watched nearby. As the load shifted, the heavy goods plummeted from the height, crashing down exactly where the manager had just stood. He barely sprinted to safety before impact. Supervision requires a safe distance. Never stand in the drop zone of overhead lifts. Maintain a strict exclusion perimeter around high-stacking operations. A man wheeled his e-bike into the elevator alongside other residents. As the door sealed, the bike's battery pack hissed and emitted thick smoke. Before anyone could press the alarm, it erupted in a violent thermal runaway, filling the small, confined space with toxic flames. Stored energy doesn't wait for a safe place to escape. At a construction site, a worker bypassed safe egress protocols and jumped from a truck bed, causing him to fall onto the scaffolding structure below due to a lack of guardrails. The deafening noise on the construction site masked the sound of the impact, leaving his colleague standing inches away, completely unaware of the emergency. Noise creates a safety blindfold. Always use 3 points of contact to exit vehicles and establish strict visual check-in intervals when working in high-decibel environments. A worker in a nylon production facility attempted to manually straighten the nylon on a high-speed winding shaft. The tension and static electricity on the moving nylon instantly snagged his hand, dragging it into the nip point. Fortunately, a nearby colleague stayed calm and hit the emergency stop immediately, preventing a severe crushing injury. Moving webs capture hands instantly. Never touch the film or rollers during operation. Rely on automated edge guides and stop the machine for any manual adjustments. A worker sat working near a furnace outlet, completely neglecting to wear any protective clothing or heat-resistant gear. Suddenly, a glowing steel billet slipped from the hearth, rolled out, and struck a bucket of scalding water placed haphazardly nearby. The vessel overturned, splashing boiling liquid onto the worker. Clutter around high heat zones creates a chain reaction for disaster. Always remove loose hazards like water buckets from production floors and strictly mandate full body protection in thermal processing areas. 2 workers entered an older freight elevator enclosed only by exposed metal bars. While chatting on his phone, one man carelessly leaned over the safety rail to look up. The elevator lurched upward, instantly closing the gap between the moving car and the stationary shaft structure. Caught off guard, his neck was crushed between the lift's railing and a metal bar attached to the wall before he could pull back. Freight elevators create deadly shear points that demand total situational awareness inside the cage. Never lean outside a moving lift or allow distractions like phones to compromise safety. Workers began scaling the side of an apartment building using an old, thin fire escape ladder. As they climbed, the aging metal structure could not support their combined heavy weight and abruptly buckled. The ladder detached from the wall, causing the workers to immediately plummet from a significant height to the ground below. Always verify the load-bearing capacity of climbing surfaces and utilize proper fall protection anchoring to prevent catastrophic failures. A man carried a lithium battery into an elevator. As the doors closed, the battery began smoking and then exploded. The man was unable to escape the blast due to the confined space. Always transport damaged or unstable lithium batteries in fire-resistant containers and avoid handling or charging them in enclosed spaces. A worker stood dangerously close to a crane, lowering a heavy trapezoidal metal block. As the load touched down, the inclined side faced him, causing the block to shift unexpectedly. The unstable mass tipped over, crushing him beneath its weight before he could react. Irregular loads are unpredictable. Always identify the center of gravity and strictly enforce a safe distance from the landing zone to prevent crushing injuries. In a warehouse, a forklift operator drove with a massive stack of sacks blocking his view, forcing a colleague to jump from his machine to avoid a collision. The fleeing worker landed directly in the path of a third forklift approaching from the opposite direction. Distracted by the commotion, the third driver failed to stop and struck him. Panic creates new hazards. Always keep loads low for visibility and stay inside the safety cage during a crash. It is your best protection. Crowding onto a single forklift, 3 men attempted to offload heavy metal bars. When the truck moved, the overloaded machine tipped forward, dumping the cargo. Relieved of the weight, the forklift violently snapped back upright, catapulting the riders to the ground. This whiplash effect caused severe impact injuries. 1 seat, 1 operator. Never carry passengers on a forklift and strictly adhere to load capacity limits to maintain stability. 3 men attempted to transport heavy glass panels using an inadequate cart. As the load became unstable and tipped, they instinctively tried to prop it up with their hands. The heavy glass pinned against the wall and shattered under the pressure, showering the workers with sharp shards. Ensure your own safety first. Never attempt to catch or stop falling glass. The weight and razor-sharp edges make it impossible to handle manually once momentum takes over. Step back and let it break to avoid severe lacerations. A blockage halted the conveyor line at a high point. Instead of shutting down the system and using a ladder or walkway, the worker climbed directly onto the inclined belt to reach the stuck goods. As he struggled with the load, he lost his footing on the slick, unstable surface and fell backward, tumbling down the machine. Conveyors are for cargo, not people. Never climb on belts or rollers. A worker climbed underneath a raised dump truck bed to perform maintenance, relying entirely on the hydraulic cylinders to hold the weight. He failed to secure the bed with mechanical safety props. Without warning, the hydraulic system failed, and the heavy metal bed collapsed instantly. The sudden impact crushed him against the chassis. Never trust a hydraulic system to hold a load. Always use approved body props or blocking devices to mechanically secure raised equipment before entering the hazard zone. A worker entered the hazardous operating zone of a crane during a lift without a spotter to warn them or the operator. As the crane maneuvered the heavy U-shaped steel bars, the load shifted or was lowered onto the worker's leg. This severe injury occurred because no banksman, signal person, was present to enforce the exclusion zone and guide the operator. Cranes require a second set of eyes. Designated signalers are mandatory to clear the path. Never approach a load or stack until it is fully landed, stable, and the operator gives the all clear. A worker was operating a paper press. The machine required 2 hands to operate, but one switch had been taped down to bypass this safety feature. The worker saw something fall into the machine and bent down to get it out. The machine, still active, pressed down on it. Never bypass safety features on machinery. Always power down and lock out a machine before reaching into it. An employee, sorting goods, began playfully bouncing on the moving conveyor. He lost his balance as the belt carried him toward a joint, pulling him in. He became pinned between the 2 sections. Machinery doesn't distinguish between work and play. It simply follows its mechanical path. Violating basic safety protocols, he maneuvered the suspended cargo directly over his own position. Without anti-slip devices, the makeshift hook failed to secure the load, causing the massive steel coils to slip and overturn, instantly trapping him underneath. Lifting operations demand certified professionals and certified rigging equipment. Never modify crane hardware, operate without training, or stand within the fall zone of a suspended load. The operator began lifting the heavy machine onto the truck, but the load was too heavy for the crane's current radius. As the boom extended, the crane's rear outriggers lifted off the ground. It tipped forward in a catastrophic failure, smashing the machine and the truck bed in a cloud of dust. The load chart isn't just a guide. It's the absolute limit between a successful lift and a total collapse. A worker, distracted by social interaction, leaned on the arm of a radial drill press for support. This shift in weight caused the unanchored, top-heavy machine to lose its balance and topple over. He narrowly dodged the falling equipment, avoiding a crushing injury. Machines are not leaning posts. All stationary machinery must be securely bolted to the floor to prevent tipping, and personnel should never touch equipment they are not actively operating. A customer entered an automatic car wash but attempted to exit the vehicle after the cycle began. Unaware of the heavy washing gantry approaching from the rear, he opened his door, creating an immediate pinch point. The moving machinery caught the door and forced it back, trapping him against the vehicle frame for a terrifying 10 seconds before an attendant intervened. Car washes are heavy industrial machinery. Drivers must remain seated with doors closed and locked until the exit signal appears. Never exit a vehicle in an active automated zone. Workers attempted to lift a heavy load at an angle, using the crane to pull sideways rather than lift vertically. As the load broke contact with the ground, gravity forced it to swing violently to center itself under the boom. The unexpected horizontal momentum pinned the worker against a structure. Cranes lift up, they do not drag. Always center the hoist directly above the load's center of gravity to prevent deadly swings. A female worker bent underneath a table to inspect a running machine, neglecting to secure her long hair. As she leaned closer, the rotating gears instantly snagged her loose locks, violently pulling her head into the mechanism and ripping the hair from her scalp. A nearby colleague reacted quickly, shutting down the power and pulling her free from the machine before further injury occurred. Entanglement hazards happen in a split second and can cause permanent disfigurement. Always tie back long hair and wear appropriate caps or hair nets when working near rotating equipment to ensure personal safety. In a textile factory, a worker attempted to inspect a live electrical outlet without isolating the power source or using proper testing tools. As he made contact, the current instantly surged through him, causing severe muscle contractions that likely prevented him from letting go. Quick-thinking colleagues cut the main power immediately. Reversing a forklift with a bulky load, an operator navigated a tight corner with limited visibility. He failed to see a colleague working in the blind spot. Suddenly, the unsecured goods shifted and toppled off the forks, crushing the nearby worker against the wall. The impact was devastating. If you can't see, don't move. Always exclude pedestrians from maneuvering zones and secure unstable loads before lifting. Ignoring strict fire protocols, a worker took an unauthorized smoke break inside the warehouse, sitting just inches from dry inventory. As he finished, he carelessly flicked the smoldering cigarette butt into a stack of cardboard boxes and walked away. The embers instantly ignited the paper, feeding a blaze that rapidly spiraled into a massive, facility-wide inferno. Open flames and smoking are strictly prohibited in storage areas for this exact reason. Always adhere to designated smoking zones and never discard ignition sources near combustible materials. Without any protective gear, a man drilled directly into the base of an unsupported wall. This dangerous undercutting caused the structure to fail, instantly collapsing on top of him. A bystander's frantic attempt to drag debris away risked shifting the load, causing secondary crushing injuries. Demolition requires strategy, not just force. Always dismantle from the top down, wear full PPE, and let trained professionals handle rescue to prevent worsening the trauma. A technician attempted to repair a press machine without cutting the power, gambling on a quick fix. As he worked, the machine shaft starts working, pinning him against the frame. He miraculously crawled free just in time, escaping with only a minor scratch on his face. Never rely on luck to survive a moving machine. Mandatory lockout, tagout, LOTO. Procedures are the only way to ensure equipment remains dead during maintenance. A mechanic was inspecting a heavy-duty truck tire during routine maintenance without using a safety cage. As he leaned in to check the pressure, the tire sidewall ruptured violently. The resulting explosion launched debris and a powerful shockwave, inflicting serious injuries on the worker. Pressurized tires store lethal amounts of energy. Always use a restraining device or safety cage during inflation and stay out of the blast trajectory. A worker reached into the die of a running stamping machine for inspection. He failed to cut the power, leaving the mechanism active. Suddenly, the ram cycled down, crushing his hand between the steel dies. The impact was immediate and devastating. Points of operation are unforgiving. Always lock out, tag out, loto, and use die blocks before performing maintenance to ensure the machine cannot cycle. A worker reached in to grab a workpiece, looking away just as the technician also lost focus. The unguarded machine cycled instantly, clamping down on his arm with crushing force. The distraction proved costly. Convenience is not worth a limb. Never operate equipment with missing guards, and keep your eyes on the line of fire at all times. A worker sat and working inside the active zone of an industrial robot, ignoring the safety perimeter. Suddenly, the automated arm swung through its programmed path with immense force. The heavy machinery crushed him against the floor before he could react. Robots are blind to human presence. Never enter an automated cell without a verified lockout, tag-out, loto procedure to stop all motion. A female worker attempted to take a shortcut by squeezing between two active sorting conveyor belts, ignoring the designated walkway. The moving machinery instantly trapped her, pinning her body tightly between the rollers. Panicked colleagues watched in confusion, unable to stop the line because they did not know the location of the emergency switch. A worker at a locomotive depot bypassed critical grounding and voltage checks during a standard maintenance shift. His safety harness inadvertently swung into a live high-voltage line, creating a deadly path to ground. He suffered a fatal electrocution immediately. Routine familiarity must never replace safety protocols. Strictly following every step of the operating regulations is the only way to ensure you go home safe. An employee was working too close to rotating machinery when his clothing was snagged. As he was pulled in, panicked colleagues attempted a rescue but failed to hit the emergency stop. Instead of halting the gear, they accidentally accelerated the machine, causing catastrophic injury. Panic turns accidents into tragedies. Frequent emergency drills are essential to ensure every worker can instinctively locate and engage the e-stop. While a crane was lifting a steel billet, it snagged another upright billet beside it, knocking it over and smashing into a nearby worker's hand. The suspended load began to swing violently. A co-worker dragged him clear just in time. One step slower, and the outcome would have been very different. Workers in a repair shop were operating without any personal protective equipment, PPE. One worker attempted to pry open a tensioned machine frame, unaware of the stored energy inside. The frame shattered explosively, spraying high-velocity metal fragments like bullets directly at him. Lacking safety glasses or protective clothing, he was struck by the shrapnel and collapsed in severe pain. Without PPE, flying debris becomes lethal shrapnel. A worker positioned himself between a suspended steel roll and a stationary stack to guide the landing. As the load settled, it shifted unexpectedly, closing the gap instantly. The massive roll pinned him against the stack, crushing him before the operator could react. Never position yourself in a pinch point. Always maintain a clear escape route and use taglines to guide loads from a safe distance. A forklift operator struggled to navigate the floor with a large, unstable stack of loosely secured goods. Seeing the difficulty, a nearby worker approached the machine's path to act as a spotter. As the operator shifted into reverse to adjust his angle, the shaky stack wobbled violently. A heavy box at the top suddenly dislodged and crashed down, striking the worker who was standing dangerously close. Unsecured loads are ticking time bombs that endanger everyone nearby. Two workers attached a heavy metal slab to a crane, but the hook was not centered directly overhead. As the load lifted, gravity violently corrected the angle, causing the steel to swing like a pendulum. The slab struck a worker, knocking him down with crushing force. Physics is unforgiving. Always center the hook vertically over the load's center of gravity and use taglines to control movement. In a tannery, a worker approached a massive tanning drum for inspection without isolating the power. As he climbed dangerously close to the idle machinery, it suddenly roared to life. The rapid rotation instantly snagged him, dragging his body into the spinning mechanism before colleagues could cut the power. Unexpected startups are fatal. Never perform maintenance without applying lockout tagout to ensure the machine cannot energize.